Welcome, everyone, to today's session. And I have with us our guest, Kletke. He is a published author, actually best-selling author, a book coach and ghostwriter, and also a professional speaker. And today he's joining us for the topic on basically 7 reasons to write your book. And Les, I want to start off with the first, one of the... I'm just going to edit this whole part off, okay? And we're going to start again. So... Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live cast. Today we have a very special guest, Kletke. Les is a best-selling author. He is a book coach, ghostwriter, and professional speaker. And today's session, we're really going to focus on 7 reasons to write your book. Basically, it's all about that mindset to getting your head right before you sit down and write. And let's share with me these 7 particular reasons that I thought was actually very important. I have a lot of value for a lot of you listening to this either live or later on your iPhone, your iPad. And Les, I know you kind of came up with this in the course of writing some other material, which I thought was really interesting. This isn't really your main focus, but in terms of getting your mindset right, one of the first areas that you thought was important to share with people, that is the love of writing. So Les, go ahead and please share with us, what does that mean?
Well, and we're going to talk about 7 reasons, and those are the key 7 reasons, or the main reasons, but there's as many reasons as there are individuals, and for a lot of people it's a combination of reasons. You don't have to have just one motivating force to write your book, but I think the most important, or the main reason for people to write a book is the joy of writing. The word is scribendi, and it refers to our love of writing. It's something we enjoy doing, and you don't have to make excuses for it. You don't have to justify it to anyone else. You enjoy writing, so sit down and write a book. That's our motivation. That's the reason for it. You don't need anything else other than that. There are some other reasons that we'll get to in a minute, but it's just our joy of writing and recording the things around us. It helps us think more about the things we're experiencing. It helps us gain a deeper understanding of what we're doing and the interaction we have with people. Enjoy the time. Enjoy writing.
What about some of the impact this has had on in terms of the love of writing? Can you share any stories you've had either personally with yourself or with some of your clients and some of the impact it's had?
Well, and I've written a half a dozen of my own books and helped about 40 people with their books, and it's always interesting to see the impact that it has, certainly through the process of writing, but when the book is finished and being able to share that final product with people. That's an exciting time, and I look at that book launch as the end of the writing process, but just the beginning of sharing the book. And I'm working on a book that for myself called Farmers of the World, that records my visits to the countries that I've been to and my visits with farmers. I have a background in agricultural economics, and so I go to visit farmers in any country that I'm going to visit, or I go to the marketplace where food is sold. And I believe that agriculture continues on well past the farm. So my line is, if you eat, you're involved in agriculture. So I think that my book, Farmers of the World, will have some interesting things for most people. And what it's intended to do is simply record my visits with the farmers from the 33, 34 countries that I've been to, and it's an ongoing process. Now, it's not going to be a commercial venture. I'm doing this for myself. My plan is to have about 100 copies of the book printed that I will share with special people. They will be gifts for people that visit my house, or gifts for people, for farmers that I meet on my continued visits. But it doesn't have to be a commercial venture. It's going to be a collection of my stories, the things that were important to me as I visited these various places. And for example, the story about Scotland is that in Scotland, the Clydesdale horse is an endangered species. Many people find that really surprising. It's the home of the breed. And when I went to a Clydesdale show, a small show in southern Scotland, I found out that it was on the endangered species list because they sold so many of the studs into the big hitches in North America a few decades ago that they ran out of breeding stock. So that will be my story from Scotland, that the Clydesdale is an endangered species in its home country.
That'd be a great story. I can't wait to hear it.
Well, and there's so many other things that we don't think about, even in the food that we eat in a different country, and the exposure that farmers of that country go through, and the challenges that they have in producing that food. So there'll be a lot of well, I believe there'll be 33 interesting stories in that book.
Right, well, great. Looking forward to the publication of that one. Moving right along here, and 7 reasons to write your book is reason number 2, and that here you have listed as economics. So I imagine this is a very broad topic, so please explain to me what you meant specifically by this one.
Well, reason 1, we said that it doesn't have to have a financial return, that you're writing for the joy of writing. Number 2 is that it should have a financial return. And when I wrote my first book, it was as a result of requests. I was speaking at the time, and I had done a Nuffield scholarship, which allowed me to study agriculture in England and continental Europe for 5 months. So I came back, and this was in 1995, before the internet was as popular and information wasn't as readily available. And I was telling the stories about what I saw on my travels in Europe and food production and the impact of the political situation. So I had people asking me if I had a book. And I didn't take the question seriously. What I did is I put together a collection of 100 or so newspaper stories that I had written on my travels over the 5 months, put a stiffer cover on them and coil bound it, and started selling it at my speaking engagements. And it was considered a book at the time, or looking back at it now, it was a pretty crude effort. But what it did is it allowed me to triple my speaking fee. In 1996, with the release of my first book, my speaking fee went from $500 an appearance to $1,500 an appearance, and that was a huge increase at the time. And I believe that speakers today, a book is almost mandatory, but speakers today can expect the same kind of return from publishing their first book and from the credibility that having a book brings them.
Now that's great. Actually, you mentioned it, you actually tripled your speaking fee, but this is back in 1994. I can imagine that some of our viewers would be thinking, well, Les, that was 20 years ago. Does it really make the same impact now? I mean, now that I can get pretty much anything I want to online for free, is the economic impact still the same as it was 20 years ago, even today?
I'd say it's at least as much, and while it may have changed in that the information is more readily available, people want a book because they enjoyed your message, they enjoyed the delivery, they want to take a part of you home with them, and that's what having a book does. It allows them to take a part of you home with them, to share at another time, to expand on the stories that you told from the stage, because certainly in 45 minutes you are not going to be able to release or to share all the information that you will in the 50,000 words, 25 chapters of a book when you write it. So this allows you to expand on the stories, and really that's what the people want. So it's a revenue source, and it gives you the credibility. I say a book is at least as important and much more easily done than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, that I think people would certainly agree with you. Obviously, we're not talking about a get-rich-quick strategy here right now. So what do you say to people or clients that come to you, or potential clients, and their main purpose for writing the book is economic? In other words, just say, I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to become a bestseller, both north and south of the border, and I'm going to quit my day job. What do you say to those kind of people where they're maybe focusing too much on the economic?
Well, let's take a step back, and the economics are there, but not in that way of getting a bestseller and selling 1 million copies of the book. Use it to establish your credibility. Use it to increase your speaking fees, whether you're a speaker, a consultant, or anything in between, or if you're doing both, you can use it in that way. But don't count on selling 1 million books. If that does happen, it's great, but don't put it in the budget to begin with. Actually, working as a book coach, one of the best things that has happened to me as a book coach is Oprah going off of the air. And now I don't have people coming to me and saying, well, I'm going to write my book and get on Oprah. At least that has been removed. That was a totally false or pie in the sky concept that so many people had. And at least that has been removed, and it's a little bit easier to deal with people on a one-on-one and to get the real factor. It's like I have a friend that's a personal trainer, and she says that the worst thing that has happened to the personal training business, or to her individual business, is the television show The World's the Greatest Loser, because everybody has that vision of losing 30 pounds the next week for the next 6 weeks and all of those things. Well, that doesn't happen because you don't have your entire day to work out with a personal trainer in the professional setting of a gym. So you've got to be realistic. So that's what I say to people when they talk about how to use a book economically. Let's think about some of the ways that we can use it in our career as a speaker and as a coach, so that we can use it before, during, after our speaking engagements, our coaching engagements, and generate some revenue that way. It is not going to be a get-rich-quick scheme.
Well, definitely sounds to me like you need to have a few things you mentioned, which is maybe some sort of back end after the product is done. The book is essentially supporting another profession. You mentioned speaking several times, so tripling or doubling your speaking fee is one natural sort of benefit, rather, of writing the book.
Absolutely, and it's got to be a combination of things. You have to have a marketing plan in place for your business, and as a part of that, a marketing plan for your book. That's so necessary to see a good return and get the true value from your effort in writing a book.
All right, well, that naturally leads us into the next one, which is a little more non-financial, of course, and that is the third reason to write your book you have listed as recognition. So, I mean, I kind of understand what this means, but tell me what you had in mind.
Recognition, and as a reason, I listed, it could be listed twice. It's recognition for yourself or recognition for someone that you think is important. One of my clients wrote her book as a form of recognition for her mother, and told the story of the hardships that her mother had gone through in rural Saskatchewan, and told the story about how her mother had dealt with her husband, the author's father, having stomach cancer and eventually dying as a result of it, how she coped with having a house fire on Christmas, and all of their belongings being destroyed. So this lady actually wrote the book as a form of recognition for her mother and the sacrifices, the contributions that she had made to her children's life. Now, from a financial side of it, are people going to buy a book about your mother? Well, maybe not. But if it's well written, and if it includes stories that they can relate to, they might well buy it as a gift for their mother, and it's a way of saying thank you. It allows them to express the feelings that they might not have felt comfortable with, and that's where a lot of these books sold, was just before Mother's Day. So many people were buying it as gifts for their mother, and in fact there was even a couple of pages put in strategically to allow you to personalize the book and write the things that were important, that you wanted to show some recognition to your mother. That's one side of the recognition. The other side is that the recognition that you get as being an author, and it's tremendous. In fact, a friend of mine who hosts a weekly radio show says that she uses a book as the initial judgment of whether a person will be a guest. That most of her guests have to at least have published one book. That's how she decides if they're a credible source or not. So publishing has become much more available to everyone. It's very cost effective today, and it just gives you the credibility, the recognition as an expert in your field.
Well, in fact, you make a very good point about recognition in terms of even amongst your peers. I don't know if there's an industry out there, a career profession that this wouldn't apply to, but imagine that you're, say, for example, a dentist and you write a book. Well, that would certainly create a lot of recognition within your industry, because think about how many other dentists have written a book on that topic. Certainly, we've mentioned professional speakers several times, and a lot of professional speakers, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of them written books, though. Imagine the impact that that's given. I mean, you don't have to give me concrete examples, but tell me, how much more recognition has a book given people, even, the same person before and after they write the book, but for some reason they're perceived differently by their peers or their community.
The catchphrase that I use is when you publish your book, when you go to print, you become an instant expert. That's what it allows you to do. It gives you the credibility, the speaking engagements, the number of engagements that you get at a higher level increase for speakers, certainly, but even your example of a dentist, just within the dentistry group and the recognition by your peers as the ideas that you put forward are important and will be recognized, but the fact that you stayed with it and actually followed through and wrote a book gives you a certain amount and well-deserved respect. So and in the speaking trade, it's almost a requirement today that someone who wants to make a living in the speaking business has to have a number of products to supplement their on-stage presence, and be that a book or a video or coaching consulting on the side. But I look at as having a book as just one of the tools in the toolbox for that, and it does bring you a great deal of recognition. It shows that you're serious. It shows that you've put some thought into the message that you are bringing on stage.
And this never gets old, does it? I mean, is there any way that you could saturate the market? Just give me an example, like the professional speakers you mentioned, it's a prerequisite. But what percentage of speakers would you say out there, in terms of total membership, actually have written books?
I would guess that it's about 60 to 65%, and that means that there's 40% who are planning on writing a book and who are talking about writing the book. I have yet to meet a speaker, and this is 10 years as a member of the Association of Professional Speakers. I have yet to meet a speaker who does not see the value in writing a book, and everyone is about to start or going to be doing a book soon. So I'd say conservatively 60% have written a book, and 40% are about to start.
All right, so certainly lots of room there still to move forward. All right, so continuing on with the 7 reasons to write your book is reason number 4, and that is legacy. Now, this has got to be a major motivation for a lot of people, so I'd be really interested to hear about some of your experiences here.
Well, there's a lady that I'm working with right now who's a survivor of the residential school system in Canada, and he is writing the book about her going through the residential school system, and it's primarily intended for her children, and explaining the impact that the residential school system had on her, how it changed her, and how it affected her and her parenting skills as she raised her children. So it's a legacy and an explanation for her children. I also have worked with particularly farmers who look at it as a legacy for their children, their grandchildren. And when we talk about the cost of producing a book, they look at me and say, my combine depreciates more than that in a year. The fact that I can leave something for my grandchildren that will be around for years to come and tell the story of working with my dad and passing the farm on to my children and my grandchildren, they find it a very economical way of leaving a legacy. And in terms of the actual cash costs, they say, when you divide it up, it'll be a few dollars between each grandchild, but if I can give them a book and share the stories and perhaps initiate a conversation, that's the big thing. That if you have a book, it's a legacy for when you're gone, but think about getting it done and sharing it with your grandchildren, and the questions that brings about, the opportunity to share those stories. One of the best legacy pieces that I've had the pleasure of working on was with a doctor from Newfoundland who was recording his stories about going to Newfoundland in the 50s and being in an outpost community, and he told the very folksy stories, but his daughter was able to find his original prescription pad, and we used it on the end sheet, on the inside front cover of the book. So when the book was printed and you opened the front cover, there was the page from his end sheet. So when he signed the book, when he personalized it for the readers, it was like he was writing on his original prescription sheet from the 1950s. An incredible touch, and think of the questions that would generate and the opportunity that would bring about for grandchildren or anyone to ask questions about what life was like in rural Newfoundland in the 1950s.
That's going to be an amazing story. You obviously talked about some of the personal reasons, the impact it has on family, but for me, the natural question would be, what about for business people, about their experiences, either growing businesses, starting businesses? How would that apply? The idea of legacy, how would that apply for business people?
Well, for business people, it's an obvious. It records the history, and it tells about the struggles that you went through, and how the business came to be at that point. And a book allows you to expand on the stories. We're all familiar with Henry Ford and the line about, you can have a Model T in any color that you want, as long as it's black. We've all heard that saying, but in a book you can expand and tell the rest of that quote. Your first reaction when you hear that, you can have it in any color as long as it's black, your first reaction is that Henry Ford wasn't really concerned about customer service. He didn't want to give the customers what they wanted. Well, in fact, the rest of that line was, as long as it's black, because the black paint dries faster. What Henry Ford was saying was that the black ones are more available. The Model T was available in navy and dark green as well, but the paint at that time took longer to dry. So the car took longer to make. He couldn't service the market as quickly. Henry Ford understood customer service to the greatest degree, and when what his customers were asking for at the time was faster horses. He understood that what they wanted was reliable transportation, and built the automobile. He was the ultimate in customer service, and I think that when we look at writing a book about a business, that's just a great opportunity to expand on some of those challenges that the next group coming through the company might not quite understand.
Yeah, no, there's some amazing legacies, and certainly I've read a lot of those, or some of those books, as many as I can. The lessons and the legacy they leave behind has been just really impactful, not just from an academic setting, but helping you basically learn a lot about their business and what they were thinking and going through at that point in time.
And then the other part, the next logical thing about that business side of it is our next reason, and that's the standing on the shoulders. When you have a business book, or when you have discovered a way of doing business, Standing on the shoulders allows the next generation to benefit from that. When you write a new book, or when you write a book about a new approach to sales or about a new way of doing things, that allows the business to continue to grow and to grow faster. I'm working with an individual right now who has come up with a consultative sales process, or further developed the consultative sales process. And his book is about the salesman not just going out and taking orders for their product, but in fact doing research and seeing what their clients' problems are, bringing that back to the factory and telling the R&D department about it so that they can find new solutions for their clients. And his approach to sales is not, or is simply put, not just about taking orders. It's about the sales staff building relationships, finding out what the clients want, having R&D work on it, and then delivering solutions in their next visit. So he's putting this together in a book that will be released later this year, and it fits well into our fifth reason about enabling the next generation to stand on the shoulders of giants.
Excellent, thank you. Moving now right along in the 7 reasons to write your book is reason number 6, and that is cathartic. I can only imagine what you have to tell us on this topic, so I'm just going to let you go on.
This is all over the map, and the part that writing a book does about healing is so different. It's as varied as the authors. Again, every book has some kind of a healing process in it because it deals with some kind of a problem. I've worked with a gold medalist from the Beijing Olympics on the Canadian rowing team, who had to write his book because, as he said, 3 hours after winning the gold medal, it's over and you don't know what to do. Now, they had in fact spent 8 years preparing for this. They were favored to win the gold medal the previous Olympics and ended up winning the silver. They retired from rowing, took a year or two off, and called it unfinished business. The eights got back together and said that they had to win that gold. So they trained again and trained and won the gold medal in Beijing. But after they were done with that, it was time to reinvent themselves. And this particular individual wrote his book and never printed it, never published it. And it is a great story. For me, it was a privilege to work with him. But he's gone on to other things. It was just part of the healing process. As well, on a much more serious and sad note, the individual that I'm working with, who is a survivor of the residential schools, says that going through the things that she went through and now being able to talk about them 30 years later is a part of the healing process, and she wants to expand this to the entire First Nations community. So part of it is the healing for herself, but another part of it is the healing for an entire group that she feels representative of. So there's so many reasons, so many opportunities in sharing these stories, and we don't have to feel that it's entirely selfish just because it is cathartic and part of the healing process. It brings so much good to so many other people out there.
I can imagine that you've been exposed to a lot of different stories and a lot of different situations as people are working through. I mean, how prepared do you feel when you basically walking into somebody's world? I mean,
25 years in the media business and hosting a radio show where I conducted 4 interviews a day. You think that you're prepared and that nothing will shock you. But one of the most difficult situations that I was ever in, and challenging situations, working with a woman who at 80 years old decided that it was time to tell her story and write the book about being sexually abused by her brother as a 10-year-old. So we meet for the first time, and I'm not really sure of what her book is about. She tells me that she wants to write her book, and I go into the interview, or or our first meeting, thinking that it's going to be a memoir. And when she tells me that this is the story that she wants to write, um, I'd be lying if I said I was prepared for that particular situation. But you handle it in the best way that you can, and it's just two people talking, and we decided how to work through this process. And yes, it was an awkward moment for me when we began that process. But in the end, I was so thankful for being given the opportunity, because I learned so much from it. And she told me about that most times the victim in that situation, or the victim feels somewhat guilty about the process. I had never thought of it that way, and she said that was very commonplace. So that's what her book is about, and the idea that forgiveness is a journey, not an event. A great life lesson, and I'd have to say that's one of the most important lessons that I have taken away from all the people that I have worked with. That many times it's the journey, not the destination. And I liken that to writing a book. We should have fun in the process, and it should be fun during the journey. But it's not over at the book launch. So it just continues on from there.
Well, certainly a great privilege you've had to be inside of people's lives in such an intimate way. So thank you for sharing. Moving right along, the 7 reasons to write your book is the 7th and last reason, which is, I'm not sure if you left the best for last here, Les, but reinventing your career or your profession. So I can imagine that a lot of people out there are at some transitionary stage. Either they're moving to increase their current business, or probably more likely to create some form of reinvention. So this has got to be a really big area that people come to you for.
Well, and we've touched on memoirs and recording all the things in the past, but when we want to establish ourselves, when we want to build a new career, what better way to reinvent ourselves than to publish a book? And I have been fortunate to have several careers. Some people say that I can't hold a job. Well, I don't know if that's the case, or if I've been fortunate to move on. I spent 15 years in the broadcast business. I worked in the agricultural media for several newspapers. I worked in extension for the provincial government, and I think all of those contribute to who I am, and experiences contribute to who you are. And what an opportunity when you're embarking on a new part of your life. And the workforce has changed. I mean, when I was going through university, they said that we would probably have 3 different careers in our life. Well, I've done that and more, and I believe that they're telling people at this time that they'll have about 11 careers, and the last 5 or 6 haven't even been invented.
Yeah. Every 4 years now, they say you can expect a new career. Every 4 years, that's what they're telling us.
So yeah, what an opportunity, and so don't put the book on hold. You got to get it out there now, because in 4 years you're going to be doing something else, and it's time to write a different book. So let's get at this one and get it out there. And interestingly, 4 to 5 years is about the lifespan of a book. So fits well. You should be writing a new book as you begin a new career, because they both last about 4 to 5 years.
In fact, that brings it to people actually when they're trying to discover how they want to reinvent themselves. Has a book assisted in that process at all?
It's helped me. What color is your parachute? I remember buying 3 different copies as I went through my career, and the last one that I've just bought recently is What Color is Your Parachute in Retirement? So, short answer, yes, a book has helped a lot. So writing a book can help you just as much as reading someone else's book.
I hear you. Now, it'd be great to hear some actual examples or stories, if you will, because I really enjoy hearing your experiences with your clients. So can you give us some examples of people that were reinventing themselves in either a minor or a major way?
Adam Creek, who was the gold medal rower at the Beijing Olympics, wrote his book and reinvented himself, and now is a spokesperson for the World Wildlife Federation. Wrote a great book, and then was part of the team that rowed almost across the Atlantic and had to be saved as they were approaching Central America. But that was one of the prime examples. Sammy Joe Small, another Olympian who was making the transition from gold medal winner on the Canadian women's hockey team to a speaker. And she talks about that you can't always choose the position you're in, but you can choose the attitude that you have. And she tells the story about being at the Olympics and not being chosen to play the final game, the gold medal game, even though it was her turn in the rotation. She chose to be a cheerleader. She could have been sitting at the end of the bench and bitter about that selection. She chose to be a cheerleader, and that's the message that she carries forward with her book. And it's not a hockey book, it's a people book that uses hockey examples. And she has reinvented herself as a speaker and a tremendous personal coach who helps so many people and encourages so many young girls to go ahead and make those choices and do the things that they do.
Really transformative process, I can imagine. And a very good point, actually, that it's not a hockey book, but it's about personal transformation. I can only imagine what kind of cheerleader or personal coach you would be in other people's lives as they go to achieve their own goals and aspirations.
Well, and Sammy Joe Small was a pleasure to work with because she had saved all kinds of notes and little things in the process as she went to 3 Olympics and as she played university hockey on a men's team and all of those kind of things because she knew that someday she would write a book. So she stored all these little scraps of paper and journals and all kinds of things. For the day that she sat down, so then it was easy to pull them out and remember the things that twigged and brought back those emotions. So for anyone who is thinking about writing a book, start that shoebox right now. Write down the little things, throw it in the box for the day that we are actually going to be writing the book, and you'll be amazed at how easy it is now that you know why you should be writing a book and if you put a little bit of effort into preparing for it.
Great. That's an excellent way to end off this session on 7 reasons to write your book. So that concludes today's session. Everyone, that was Les Kletke. He is a best-selling author, book coach, as he's mentioned, a ghostwriter to several great stories, and of course, professional speaker. The 7 reasons to write your book. If you want to get in contact with Les, of course, there's going to be some links just down below this video if you want to get on his list and receive more valuable information, insights, and tips, including sharing many of his experiences both personally and with his clients. So thank you,
Kevin. Why don't we give them the opportunity and give our viewers the opportunity if they'd like to talk about writing their book? Include my contact information, and what I'll do is make an offer of a free 1-hour session to discuss writing your book. Give me a call, send me an email, and let's set up a time to talk about writing your book. Now that you've got the reasons, let's talk about how we put it in practice.
Excellent idea, Les. So I will include that after you just click the link down below. I'll include an opportunity there to reach out to Les directly to book that 1-hour free consultative coaching session to discuss your next book project. All right. Thanks again, everyone. And that concludes today's broadcast.